Recording. Good morning and good evening to Aparna. Welcome everyone to Inside Fashion Design, this week's community conversation. Happy to have Aparna Saxena joining us from all the way on the other side of the world, who is the CEO of TORAJAMELO. And we're going to talk to her today about the company, the mission, the incredible strides they're making with helping women, supporting the economy, maintaining and sustaining handicraft and their tradition, and turning that into fashion and business. And they've done fashion shows now, and they have weavers all over. And so I'm just excited to hear about the company, your mission, your vision, and all the great things you're doing. And then also we'll talk about how someone can connect with you and work with you if they were to want to incorporate some of the, the textiles and the production and handicrafts that you can offer for their brand. So why don't we start, Aparna? I would love to just hear a little bit about your background, because you're the CEO. I'm not sure if you have a fashion background training or if you're more on the business side. So maybe a little bit about that, and then how you joined TORAJAMELO, and then we can dive into the mission and the cause and all of the things that that the company does. So starting with kind of where you came from, how you started, and how you connected with TORAJAMELO.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Britta. Just it's TORAJAMELO.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
I'll have to work on that.
Yeah. So Toraja is the place, and Melo means beautiful in the indigenous language. So it basically meant beautiful Toraja because we owe our origins to that place. That's where we started from. Yeah. So that's why hence the name TORAJAMELO, though now we are not limited to that location Toraja, which is in the highlands of the island of Sulawesi. If you look up the whole Indonesian archipelago map, Sulawesi is sort of like east, but not the easternmost. Yeah. And Toraja is a place there. So about me, interestingly, I have zero fashion background. And in conventional sense, if you talk, I have zero conventional fashion sense. For me, it's more, about functionality. It's about its purpose and, what you're comfortable with. I actually come from a business, supply chain, and e-commerce background. That's how that was most of my career. And then I got involved in the impact space. And I knew of TORAJAMELO during my Singapore days when I was with another impact business that was working with businesses like TORAJAMELO for connecting them to the market and helping them with trade finance. Yeah. So that's when I got to know of TORAJAMELO. And in fact, I moved to Indonesia to work with actually an e-commerce company, Alibaba company, and as the head of last mile logistics. But I continued to support TORAJAMELO since I knew of it as an advisor. Yeah. So that's how the association continued. And we can jump into January 2020, we know what had started happening in the world. And I'd actually come back from Vietnam. So I was in Vietnam also for a while, and I came back and doing something else when the founder actually reached out, and basically she asked me to take over the business. She essentially felt that it needed something new, someone more, I think, younger, more aware, who could essentially help take this business to the next level, keeping in view with the whole digitalization, because TORAJAMELO was fully offline before that. So essentially, and also it's a matter of trust, right? Because it's a business, if you've grown, or it's an organization that's your baby, then you need to have someone you trust. And well, supposedly she trusted me. So after 10 years plus of running it, she actually reached out, and I was actually hesitant. And I took my time to think over. I usually jump at challenges, and this is my third startup, if you would say. So, after two interesting fiascos, I was a bit like, okay, I'm going to think about it a bit. but she was quite persistent. And then June 2020, I took over. Yeah. So I come from the business side, and but I've understood what we stand for. I think it's about value, and it's about a mission. And then, finding the right people to work with. So as long as I understand what it means for us, I have, sort of accepted the fact and that I don't need to be a fashion designer, right? As long as I'm aligned on the mission, vision, values, I know how to run the business. Then we just work with the right people and experts to take this further.
Yeah, that's great, because it's really about the product that you're producing, and in your case, running the business in a manner that is sustainable and can grow and can support more people. So it's great that you had all that other experience. And so it's about 10 or 12 years old then?
Oh, it's 15th year, 2008.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, I was reading about the founder as well, and also interesting background where it's more about the business and working with the communities to really build something that provides work. And what I really love was with these type of companies and yours is that you're really focusing on the tradition and the handicraft that the locals there already have. You're not necessarily teaching them a new technique or a new tradition. They're able to maintain what they've been doing for years and years. And that makes it extra special in my mind. And so speaking of that, could you talk a little bit about the history of the weaving? And one thing I really noticed that you see in the textiles is all the patterns and the motifs. And I know some of those have certain meanings. So could you talk a little bit about that, the tradition, the history of the weaving? And another thing I was thinking is where are the yarns coming from, and even the dyeing of the different colors? So how does that whole, what is the history and process of that?
Yeah, so it's Indonesia is an extremely rich and diverse country. Yes, so I think comparable or even more diverse than India in certain aspects in terms of its ethnic groups. So Indonesia has more than 1100 plus recognized ethnic groups, indigenous groups, which means it will have so many varieties of weaving. They might be similar, but not the same. And we need to acknowledge that. So it's extremely, extremely diverse, and we haven't even scratched the surface. Yeah. And in fact, I say this, I use this as my tagline to say, I really want people to understand and know and learn that Indonesia is beyond BBC. And when I say BBC, it means batik, Bali, and coffee, because that's like the quintessential stereotype of Indonesia, right? That's what people think. While, I myself learned this from the founder, that batik is not even indigenous to this country. It was brought here from China and India through the Dutch, made and scaled under the Dutch colonization, where it just became pretty big, and it's centered around the Java island. But what is actually indigenous to Indonesia are its weavings, right? Which have been, if you look at traceability, they could go back thousands of years, or at least hundreds, right? Because these tribes, these groups have been there for many, many years. And because Indonesia is so diverse and so spread about, right? So the cultural diversity is also because of its geographical spread too, right? A part of it is literally, the easternmost part is above the middle of Australia. So it's the Melanesians, the Polynesian, influence from the extreme east. And then in the west, it's the proximity to the Malaysian, part, and then the closeness to China, and then India, right, through the Silk Route. So because of which there is variety of all kinds, right? So therefore, I can't tell you that what each of these weaving means, because honestly we haven't even scratched the surface. But what I can tell you is the way they hold meaning, like it is in every indigenous groups is the kind of weaving we support is called as the backstrap loom weaving. It's not the semi-automated looms, because there are many kind of looms, right? Semi-automated, the sit down, etc. There are different parts of the world. This kind of weaving is only done by women, and it's passed on from generation to generation. Earlier, it only used to be family to family, right? So the grandmother to daughter or daughter-in-law, and then to the grandchild, right? But now, I think, create regeneration, we are one of the few, in addition to other organizations, that wants this practice to be passed on, beyond the family too, right? And then meanings. So weaving used to be the cloth, right? Because before, if you remember, industrialized looms came in, and the way of making fabrics came in. This is what they used to wear. And then if this was there, where it had its significance either in their daily life, so the motifs would signify activities in their daily lives, what they would observe in nature in their daily life. Often it would be their outlet for women to express themselves, right? So yeah. And then, of course, there was the ceremonial cloth, which is done during special occasions, during festivities, or even during funeral, right? So the color significance, the color palette, what motifs to use when, plays a strong significance, right? And then the other part that comes in is that certain communities will use more nature in terms of flora, while in certain they will use fauna also. Yeah, for example, the animals that they see around, right? And then it's often related to their homes and the way they live. So, for example, Toraja, where we started from, and so this piece behind me is not Toraja, right? But Torajanese weaving is a lot about geometrical shapes and a lot of symmetry, because even their homes have those wood carvings, okay? And then animals, because it's a megalithic culture, so they, have animals, they also sacrifice them in the ceremonies, etc. So then animals play a significant role. There are a few other, such kind of communities and cultures which do animals, but often it would be, flowers, it would be different shapes, but each of them will have a significance, will have a purpose. They have names. They are supposed to be used on particular occasions. Often even that is there. There's something that signifies masculinity. So it's meant to be only woven for a male, right?
Okay.
And then there's something for female. So it's really, really diverse. I have some pieces I will, show you right before we wrap up, as you had told me.
Okay.
So essentially, this is the way it is. And honestly, it's, it's amazingly versatile. And what makes it interesting and complex is, for us, when we talk about techniques, weaving techniques, right? For example, supplemental weft or float warp or, simple weaving. But for them, each of these will have their local names, right? For example, ikat, which is resistance dyeing, will be known as something else to them locally.
Okay.
So it's actually quite diverse, quite complex, but at the same time, very, very interesting. So let me pause here so that you can, inject questions or anything.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And that's a huge, very broad, like you said, so many different regions with different influences. So in a way, that's really neat, because each one will look unique to their location. And that again starts telling the story of the piece, that gives it more meaning behind what they're wearing or what they're using it for. What is it cotton, or what is the fiber? I didn't get into that part of it when I was reading about this.
Yes.
Is it cotton, local grown in the community? And
great question. So when they were doing this originally, right, they would use what is around, right? So it would be the local cotton. Then there is something called a skapuk, which is sort of a wood cotton variety, which grows wildly, right? And then I think some areas had some exposure to silk. Yeah.
Ah,
It was also banana fibers. So they had everything that was available in the vicinity. You get it? But
gotcha.
then, of course, industrialization came in,
Mhm.
and that's where the problem, as I would say, we are trying to address, started is that they started switching to fibers which are easier to weave, but which are largely polyester. Yeah, so
Yeah,
this is polyester largely from China, started coming in about 35, 40 years ago. And it's easy to weave with polyester, right? You can't
right,
blame them. And cheaper, right? And then you get all these chemical colors because they
right.
used to dye it all naturally. And how were they dyeing it? What is available in your surrounding? For example, Toraja, which is in the highlands, they don't use so much of plant dye. So they use mineral and mud. So they were
Ah,
literally using stones, what they would see around, and mud dyeing,
wow.
right?
Okay.
And then there are places where, depending on which plants grow, they were using those, right? And this was their ancient wisdom. But again, as I said, 40 years, this came in. Secondly, also industrialized cotton came in. So the story of cotton is very interesting for Indonesia. They had it, but we can't trace it anymore. And the earliest you can trace it again during the Dutch time, about 300, 400 years ago, where Dutch bought in cotton and then it was localized. But unfortunately, during the second president, Suharto era, which was almost like a dictatorship and known to be a very tough time, most of the local industry was shut down and it became heavily import driven. So
Ah,
all the local production. So the sad fact which we are trying to work towards fighting is that 99% of Indonesia's cotton is imported
yeah. Well, that's
from
like,
India, from Australia, from
right.
US, indeed. So it's not that they didn't have, so they lost it. And now, the journey to reclaim it starts, but it's going to be a long haul. What's happening now that's getting explored is locally grown viscose, right? So
Oh, okay.
local, yeah. And one of the larger organizations, right, that's taken the lead, and they've sort of perfected a closed loop process, right? Because what is negative about all these processes is, even if you have natural fiber, the way it is treated to convert it into yarn is often chemically toxic. And if you haven't managed that process and you're releasing the toxic chemical effluents into waters or whatever, you're causing damage, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
yeah, so
appreciate your transparency, because this is
yeah,
an issue for a huge amount. I mean, most apparel companies, and it's the cost, it's the availability, the colors you can get, and all of that. So by you explaining that also helps, the listeners today and the consumers understand that, the effort is there, and you're really being transparent and sharing what you're working with, what your situation is, and what you can achieve, and what you're trying to achieve in the future.
yeah,
And with your type of product, it's not a mass produced thing. It's not fast.
yeah,
It's still very traditional. It's going to be long life. I mean, these pieces are items that you're going to have forever and maybe even pass down.
yeah,
So if there was a skirt or something that was polyester yarns, most likely it's going to be years and years before it goes into a landfill somewhere. It's probably going to stay in the family. It will last a really long time. And in the future, I know they're working on ways to
yeah,
break down polyesters to recycle them, and avoid
yeah,
the whole, dumping it somewhere in landfill.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's interesting to know and
yeah,
understand. And
yeah.
with all that said, I would love to share the video of the weavers so people can just get a little glimpse of, what it looks like when they're doing that. And okay, sorry, I had it queued up here. Tablet weaving, this is the
Yeah.
correct one, right?
Yeah, so that's the technique of tablet weaving done in Mamasa, and it's the only community in Indonesia that does that. So it's pretty unique.
Okay, you can see my screen.
Basically, not yet.
Okay, hold on one sec. Share screen. Okay, now can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, let's play this one and then we can chat about it after. What are these ads? Here we go.
So you get to see where it is. Yeah.
Great. So green, lush.
So all this is polyester yarn still, right? Because this is what we had
Okay.
to start with, but now we have transitioned to natural fully.
Okay.
And this is how they get it. You saw those,
Okay.
cylinders. Yeah, that's how they buy the yarn from the market. And Mamasa especially, they are extremely proficient in weaving long. So which
Okay.
means from one start to the end, it can be up to 10 meters. So you
Okay.
see this lady, yeah. So they are one of the few communities because not everyone can be proficient in, making sure that the motif and the quality stays
Is there?
up to the standard for such a long cloth. Yeah. And this is the technique of tablet weaving, which again, only this community is the one left. And you know what they basically do is these are wooden tablets with grooves cut in. And in the groove, they have already imagined the final pattern, you see. And then as she's putting the threads in and then she's turning the tablet around. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and of course, they started with wood. It used to be wood, but again, with everything coming in, they actually switched to plastic because plastic is so easy to manage. But then we then sourced a special artisan and craftsman to create the wood once again. And then we had gifted it to them so that they use. And by the way, this is what the road and access was like. Things have improved now. This is about 8-year-old video, but especially in terms of access to the road and everything, it's just 40 kilometers from Toraja, right? So that they're all part of the Toraja tribe, but Mamasa is another.
Let me do this. Hold on, I still got a video going.
The video is still continuing.
One down. Went to a different video.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have so many questions. First of all, I was thinking about the back strap. They're on the floor, it's attached to their body. Has that changed at all to become more, is it easier? Can they do it more on tables where they're sitting upright, or things that have kind of maybe improved the physical challenges of the back strap weaving?
Great question. Exactly. It's literally backbreaking. And by the time they hit their mid-40s, often quite a few of them would be stooping or they would have severe back issues. And also a lot of permanent scarring and injuries, right? Because it's pressure. So what we have done and started already is that exactly, you don't want to compromise and bring in automation, but can you make it ergonomic? And we actually are in process of getting our design patented, but it's literally a standing frame, right? And when I say standing, the frame is standing, but the weaver can sit like she would sit on a chair. So the weaver can sit on a chair and weave, and using screws and tension. So using tension from screws and tightening, they're able to get that same tension that they would get by putting their feet, right? So because now the feet is removed, right? So it's basically that. Also, the interesting part is if for weaving to start, the first step is the warping, right? What is the warping is you basically take the thread out, right? From the
the spool, cone.
The spool, exactly, the spool or the cone, and you have to unspool it, and then you have to essentially do the warping so that it can be laid, and then she does the webs, right? The weaving.
And it looked like it took several people for the setup part.
Indeed. And so even if not several people, even if it is her, but it takes long, right? And imagine they walk around, right? So first time I was looking, I said, wow, this is like super inefficient. Like what's happening here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of, and then some people use their kids. So, you give it to the kid and the kid goes around playing.
Yeah.
Yes. But like, how do you make it better? So which is why that frame that, the ergonomic loom we've created also allows them to do that in the same setup, right? So you can put it down and do it along the frame, right? Without having to go around, because otherwise they would put these two sticks as you saw. But if the frame itself can lie and you can do that sitting, it becomes a little more functional. So it's sort of like a multifunctional setup with us seating. We created about 10 of these, and they've been, given to our community members in East Nusa Tenggara, right? Or the East Flores as it's called. Again, the challenge is to get them used to it, right? So because everybody's used to a certain way, and the first few times is a bit uncomfortable, they're not sure of the quality that will come out and the control. So it requires a lot of, persuasion and convincing. But then, if the early adopters pick up, we are hoping we can convince more and more women, because it's also good for them, their body.
Yeah.
But the most important part, Rita, is if you want to convince the young generation to continue, you have to make it functional and easier, right? Because a lot of the young ones are like, no, yeah, my mom did it. She is okay to break her back. I don't want to, right? And they rather prefer to have a tougher life in the city, but not doing this kind of work.
Right. Yeah. They're seeing their mothers, their grandmothers that are hunched over, and the pain, and and with access to technology, which I'm sure they still get, it would be tough to convince them to follow in their footsteps without some sort of improvements and better methods. So I imagine it takes some convincing, and even the older generations are, like you said, they're just used to doing it for generation after generation, passing it down, and then modern technology comes in, and it's like, whoa, that's could take away from our tradition and all that. So, well, it's good to hear you're trying. And because that's one thing every time I watch the backstrap loom videos, I just think, oh gosh, that must be so painful to sit for, 8 hours, 10 hours and every day doing that, even though it's a lovely tradition, and they do want to pass it on. It's just the physical, the physical portion of it would get very tough. So I do want to jump into products that you make and how someone could work with you. But before we go there, could you share, so I know you have weavers all over. You don't have one or a couple of main facilities, right? Is it more community? They go into their home or some sort of gathering place where they're actually making the product? And so how is that set up, and how do you coordinate between different weavers all over? Is someone driving, to pick up from here and bring it there? And then if you're cutting and sewing into particular, because I know you guys do fashion with skirts and shirts and bags, and so is that cut and sewn? Where is that happening? And how is that process set up with you?
Okay, so we are a brand, right? Which means we have our own design process, right? So the whole designing conceptualization is always done where we are based, right? Which is in Jakarta. So that's where the design and the whole creative aspect happens. One thing is very clear, they are artisanal weavers. Their role is to weave and not to make something else. So weavers will only weave the cloth,
Mhm.
Of course, our aim is whenever we work with any community, they need to know what this cloth can turn into. And also we need to have alignment with them that what can be done with the cloth. Because as I said, often there is ceremonial cloth that you cannot cut or do something to it
Right.
without knowing the significance, right? So that's where the alignment always happens, right? So our foundation arm is always the first one that will go in and work with the community to essentially make them aware of market. And what when I say that is the basics of marketing, how product development happens, color palettes, right? Because oh my God, some of their color palettes are, yeah, you wouldn't want to bring them to the market. Nobody's going to buy it, right? But it works for them. Yes. So, you know, telling them about that, why this needs to be done without compromising their motives. Yes. Because do remember, a weaver who's learned weaving, say over a period of 8 to 10 years, has become an expert by then, right? They will achieve that finesse, that quality, which means they can easily, if I show them, they can copy that motif if they want to, but they will not, they should not, because it is not the geographical origin of that motif. Right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And for them, it has a value, right? So that's why the whole part of aligning with the weavers is to weave what is indigenous and from its geographical origin. And then the color palettes, etc., comes from us based on what is it that we are designing for, right? It's always pre-agreed. We always provide the yarn too. So the yarn, dyed yarn, comes from us unless and until the community has the proficiency and expertise, right? They have regained their ancient wisdom of being able to dye, right? Because most of them have lost it now. Yeah. So we provide the dyed yarns and they will weave. And then it comes to us, the QC process is done. We have, created standards over a, experience of so many years as based on density, finesse, quality, everything, right? Accuracy of what was told and this. And then after that, based on whether it was meant for a fashion line or whether we are creating accessories out of it, of course, internally, we'll have the sample designs and cuts and everything are done by us. But then we have production partners who we've worked with over a period of time, who we trust, who do our standards, who will then produce it, right? So multiple stakeholders, extremely complex supply chain, right? And what is the strength is, because I know you were inferring, and in fact, Jim also mentioned, like, how do you manage, right? A key thing, a success, the designation of success in a relationship of this sort that we have is a strong local leader and coordinator, right? Because we work with communities, so there needs to be this, I wouldn't always say single, but a group of people or small group of people who are willing to be the coordinators for the community, because literally the yarn is sent, somebody takes the initiative of distributing it, aligning, etc. Right? Also, there are places where communities where we have worked, where through donations we have created the community weaving space, right, where they can come and weave. But that is more of a choice, because do remember, none of these weavers will ideally weave 8 to 10 hours a day. They're not factory workers. They will maximum weave 5 to 6 hours, because it's blended into their lives, right? These are women who wake up, take a bath, cook, go work in the field, or send the kids to school, make a meal, rest, start weaving, then have their lunch, and then weave again, or maybe go to the field again, whatever. So the idea is that how well it can blend with their life. Often what happens though is, if they feel, oh yeah, we work better collaboratively, there are generally these community areas where the loom is very quick to purpose, right? You just tie it to one end and it's done. The interesting part about that, right, and I'm going to take a minute to explain, is it's also, these community places also become a safe haven for women, and I'll tell you how. Backstrap loom weaving is only done by women. It's not a place for a man. Right. A lot of these communities are communities that have generational domestic violence.
Right. Okay? Yeah, I know part of your big mission was kind of rescuing and empowering women that were in that.
So what happens is, if the woman So she can't do much. She can't maybe get out of it at this stage. She can pick up a loom, go to the community space, and the man can't step in. And what happens then is, one is she gets her sense of agency. She gets the spirit of community because other women will be her strength. And it's also a message to the man that this is my area, you can't come in. Yeah.
Excellent.
So it was also important to have these spaces. So our aim is to create more and more of these, right? And that's always done in coordination with the community, representatives.
Yeah,
but the
excellent.
supply chain, that's how it works, and it is complex, which is why for larger projects, a lot of planning goes in, even selection, right? Which community is ready for this kind? Because each community is of different size, from 20 women to maybe 150, and then also their level of proficiency, right? And then also what kind of motives. So a lot of variables are at play.
Yeah.
Decision is based on based on that. And definitely for launching anything, and if it's done to be done at a certain scale, it's minimum 6 to 9 months, right? Which is why we are a slow lifestyle brand. We don't want to launch, not even seasonal. I don't want to launch a collection year after year unless there is a clear purpose behind it as to why, which is why your later question of cooperation, working with others, is something super exciting for us, because that's a great way to, create something without overburdening ourselves to just produce for the sake of producing.
Right. And that's something that's a key factor for designers or brands to really understand and plan to incorporate that slow process into their timeline and their expectations. Because, if you're in the industry as a designer or design person, you're used to everything being so fast. You send it to Asia, you get a sample back in 3 weeks, you fit it, you get a second round, place an order, it's so fast. And this is the true meaning of slow fashion. So
we joke internally, we're not slow, we're the slowest fashion. The slowest.
Well, so worthwhile, because every step of the way is for a purpose. It's affecting the lives of the people that are touching it in a very positive way. And
bottom line is, Britta, it's high quality, and we offer lifetime repair, return, and renew, right? So the first main thing is the product, right? The story is a strong backing, but literally, right, some of our older pieces, right, which Mama Dini had launched like 10, 12 years ago, the buyers still have them. They talk about it, they wear it. And you can still see the sewing, so which means the selection of the production partner, but also the weaving, right? It's of that quality, right? So which is why it's about also creating that such that it can have that life, because if we make cheap products quickly, well, they're not going to last long.
Yeah. Right? And that's fast fashion again, that goes into a dump somewhere after less than a year, probably. So
indeed.
Did you have some things to show us? And then I'm also curious about the process of someone being able to work with you, but I know you had some things to show.
Yeah, sure, I will. And I think Sloan, did you want to ask something, or no, you're good?
I was just looking at this website and all of these beautiful photos. It's just, especially of the clothing, are so cool. And I was just going to ask, what kind of design choices do you end up having to make when you're working with smaller pieces? Because do you have to, right? Or just long skinny ones, like in the videos and photos? So how do you choose you have to make a lot of different design choices and get really creative of how am I going to incorporate this shape into a bag? Or, and I always think if I'm a designer and I pick up a piece of cloth that was hand woven, I would be hesitant to cut into
You don't want to cut it, right?
Yeah, I would.
Which is really interesting. This is a twist for the design process. Is you're designing around the textile rather than designing a style and then making the textile fit into that style. It's opposite.
Exactly. And also there's a mix, right? For example, including this jacket I'm wearing, by the way. It's in that video, but I will show you. So this you see, this is, if you see, this has in between a bit of resistance dyeing, so ikat, and it's just these plain lines, right? So now this can serve as a scarf. This can be like a thick belt, right? And this has come off a piece which is of these lines repeated. So this is being cut from 75 centimeter by 150 or 160 centimeter length. You get it?
Yeah.
So the length is this, but possibly from that piece, we made 4 of these. You get it?
Oh, yeah.
So it's also visualizing, okay, this is like plain weaving. So what this can be done, right? To like what can be done from this?
You mean plain weaving, like over,
straight
under, over,
lines.
under? Yeah.
Yeah, plain would mean straight lines, because over under is called float
That's it.
walk, because it looks like it's, you know, floating, right?
Okay.
See, this is
Oh,
another
okay.
example of that, right? But here what you see is it has more of resistance dyeing or ikat. You see the ikat band is thicker, right? So this is slightly more tougher, because the whole story of resistance dyeing is you have to first dye the yarn with these and then only you weave, right? So you have to dye the yarn in this pattern, which means you tie in between and dip and dry. So it takes longer to do. But nowadays, often in the market, it's pre-dyed and available, right? So you also have to check whether your weaver is doing that if you want the authentic stuff, right? Because if we want the authentic stuff, then we have to have our community coordinators overseeing. Because otherwise the tendency is they'll go to the local market, right? They've mastered that too. Then they'll have a pre-dyed this there, and all they do is then weave. You get it? But see, this is another example. This is again come off something which is actually about, usually it's 70 to 75 centimeter wide. Now, can you guess why it is that wide? Take a wild guess. Why the width is 70 to 75 centimeters usually?
So you can sit with it?
Exactly. It's a span of the woman's hand.
The arm.
Indonesian,
Gotcha.
arms. Indonesian women are petite and smaller. So 70, 75 centimeters is the maximum they can stretch, right?
They
Like you
can
can't
reach.
weave ready. Yes. So that's why the usual is that some of them, they use this technique. So this piece, this is one of our newer communities, and they're pretty good, by the way. They don't need much training. It's Manggarai, close to Labuan Bajo, which I think people have heard of, the Komodo Island, famous.
That's really pretty.
Extremely fine. You see how fine it is, and when I touch it also, it's soft. And by the way, they have mastered the skill of, can you imagine, they have mastered the skill of having these tiny holes in between, you see?
Wow.
Can you see? Yeah.
Yeah.
They are able to do this because what they do is they use this very fine comb. So they have created this wooden toothed comb, very fine lines, and they use the comb to get that fineness. And they're even able to do wider. So, you know, it's this kind of innovation. Then another one I want to show you is another scarf. This is a community that only does ikat, and they only do earthy shades from natural plants available around them, natural plants and mud. And that's why.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful.
And this is what Emma had actually picked up. So Brita,
okay, that's gorgeous. Yeah.
Picked up largely from this community. So it's brown. There's a bit of yellow. So the yellow comes from turmeric. The green comes from papaya leaves. And the brown is coming from mahogany tree.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Yeah. So they do only natural. Yeah. They do only natural. If you ask them to do it their way. Of course, if you provide them the yarn and the dyed yarn, then they will recreate. But what they will not compromise on is they do ikat, so they will do ikat, right? They'll do what is local to them. You get it? Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And then just to show you this, I mean, my purse and my phone pouch. Can you see the weaving?
Yeah, just really fine lines.
Both from the same community. And if you see these fine lines, they're of different widths so that it gives the feeling of layers. You get it? Layers.
It's like a plaid.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So this is Matapa from Toraja. And it's very simple to look at, but you can do so much, and the color palettes, right? So then these are very popular, and we learned it by doing in creating accessories. You hear
Right.
it? So that's why in a clothing, maybe you will be like, yeah, I don't know where clothing, clothing, you need more of these as accents. But with accessories, these are quite popular.
Mhm.
And this we have learned. So Sloan, as you asked, it's a back and forth process. So you start somewhere, right, with some conceptualization, and then you will try and create some samples and test it, and you do some focus group discussions, check to figure out the acceptance, and that will then tell you, hey, this is where it could fit in. For example, this one is very special. While you look at it, it's a very simple diamond. I don't know if you can see, because it's two colors. It's not very
Okay.
clear. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
little.
it's basically diamonds. Yeah, you can't see. It's essentially diamonds, but two different color threads. Yeah.
Okay.
For the communities, this is like boring, like who wears it? But this became so popular in Japan. And then when the founder came back and told the communities, this suddenly became cool for them. Otherwise, they're like, why do you want me to weave this,
Yeah, it's
dull
not what they're
diamond
used
shapes?
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now they love it. Now they locally wear it, and we've played with different colors, so the dual colors give you, like, imagine doing red and black. So you have two colored scarves, which you can use
Right.
either ways. And the reason I'm showing you this piece is this motif is especially special to us because our founder literally revived it from extinction. There were only two women left in their 70s who were refusing to teach because their daughters were not willing to learn. It took her 2 years to convince them. And together as a community, they decided a name for this. This didn't even have a name. Like, they were like, yeah. And finally, now this motif exists. It's locally popular. And even for us, this gets a lot of acceptance across age groups, especially younger, because it's simple enough, right? Because often the Gen Z are not going to like something very loud and very traditional.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So this tends to, really appreciate it. And when you do it with different colors, like, you do a peach colored one with white, it comes out very beautiful. Pretty. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like a print, but not an all over print. It just gives enough of that.
Indeed. So that's what we are doing. And in terms of, because again, I think Sloan's question, how do you decide? So what we also learned was that weaving tends to be looked at very traditional and very occasion based, right? I'm going to only wear this if it's going to be some, big occasion like a wedding or something. And we want to break that, right? We want to show that pieces of weaving, if done the right way, can be part of your daily lives, like the products I showed you. Which is why if you see a new collection, like the video that you have, Britta, is essentially focused on the Gen Z and millennials, saying we can play with colors and weaving to make it a part of, your functional daily lives, or give it a cool modern feel without losing the traditional values. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's great, because it has to appeal to the younger generation so that they keep supporting it. They buy it, they use it, they wear it.
Yeah, for example, this jacket I'm wearing, by the way, right? See, it has really this cute weaving right here. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I'm not the best, model for it, but, so it's this band of weaving, and it's here. And this is like, bomber kind of a jacket. No, it's not bomber. Sorry. It's like this. I don't know what to call it. We call it the Batman style, kind of, but yeah. And it's very functional, and it's light cotton, because for Indonesia it's this, but maybe if we do it for a other country, we'll use a thicker material. And this is something it's appreciated, right? It's cool enough, but at the same time, it's not like too, oh my God, so conventional, boring,
Right.
You get it?
Right.
Yeah. So we are basically trying to learn along and experiment along these lines, because for us, appealing to the younger generation is super critical, both on the supply and demand side, to sustain.
For sure. Yeah. We're getting short on time, but I do want people to know how they can work with you and what the process would be. So say you have two scenarios. On one, the first scenario is a small designer that knows about you and is just coming to you to partner with creating some styles. So they would work with you on what those styles are. And then the second scenario would be maybe a designer who has very specific, they want a skirt and they want it in these colors, and maybe they're not sure about the pattern that you can do. So how would you go about working with those types of scenarios, that so people can understand, they can reach out to you and possibly, try to partner with you on some of their future products and design and development?
Okay, so for the first case where it's literally a process of co-creation, right? Because they're also coming with a blank,
Slate, yeah, just
slate, and
Mhm.
hey, let's co-create. So it would basically start with us sharing what we have, sharing stories of the communities, what appeals, and then we basically work on it together, right? And really co-create as to what would work. And depending on where they are based, who are they looking to target, we'll have to figure that out, right? And then you would zero in on, okay, I think this motive, this makes sense. And of course, the final decision-making factor is how much and by when, right? Because that is going to be a key decision-making factor to decide which one should we go for. You choose a very complicated motif for ikat that will take months, well, forget it, right? Unless you want to create like a limited edition of 4 pieces. You get it?
Okay.
Yeah. So that's for the first one. For second one, of someone who wants to create something, so they're clear on what they want in the color palette, but maybe not the motif. Again, can be done. Timeline would be key. The reason being, if they want a specific color palette, means we need to either align, are they okay with chemical dyeing? Because chemical or polyester yarn, we are not doing anymore, right? We've stopped while ago. But chemical dyeing or natural dyeing, because if it's natural dyeing, literally it's an R&D process to experiment and come closest to that color palette. You get it? So
Right.
after we have decided the motif, that R&D on color takes long. And that's where Jim's question of weather plays a role, because Indonesia is in the southern hemisphere. It rains from October to Jan, and nowadays, thanks to global warming, it's raining randomly. And for natural dyes, humidity, weather, sun plays a big role. A green can end up looking bluish, whatever, if it doesn't get the right conditions. You get
Right.
it?
Yeah.
So those then play a factor. So if it's urgency, then we will tell them to stick with chemical dyeing, and then you will choose a simpler motif which can be woven in a much more faster manner. But if it's really uniqueness, so it's what is the theme, right? What is the theme? What is the color palette? All those would be key, alignment points, and then we will agree on a timeline. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so do you have in-house, or maybe not in-house, but within your resources, like pattern making and sample making, and
Yes. So we have our in-house designer, plus we also have our, small communities of sewers, seamstresses and tailors who we trust to, quickly create pieces if we want to visualize, right? And even helping with patterns and this. So we do have that, right? And then of course, the R&D process, right? That for designing, that's the key. But here I wouldn't call it the bottleneck, the deciding factor. I'm not worried about all these, sewers and all these, would be which motif, what type, right? Because that will decide the timeline, which can be, by the way, Brita, anywhere from 6 months. Can even go 2 years. People have waited 2 years also if you want something very specific.
Yeah.
But then it's literally a limited edition, blah, blah.
Right. And they're timeless. So, and like you said, it's not seasonal product. It's a timeless product that.
And each piece is unique, by the way. Each piece is unique.
Yeah.
They'll have that.
And potentially, once you dial in that specific, color, pattern, yarn quality, a brand could just in the future change a color, but keep everything else the same. so they could update things, you know, 3 years
Agreed,
from now, if
totally.
it's some hot color they really must have. And they're not going through the process from day one, they're already set up. So then much quicker, obviously.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
we're really open for these kind of collabs, right? Because as I said, I don't want to just release a line after line. Honestly, if somebody comes in with their vision and ideas, it adds so much of character to what you're trying to create, right? Because as long as
Right.
we tell the right stories, the medium can change, right? The medium of storytelling, and it can be somebody else's design bringing it to life.
Right.
And I mean, the wider it goes, the better, because as I said, I want the global north to know that we are beyond batik, Bali, and coffee. So
Yes.
please collaborate. Let's
Yeah, it's
collaborate.
so,
Let's discuss.
yeah, it's so funny that you say that, because that's truly what people think about, including myself. Like, you know, I think of
Yep.
Bali and I think of all the batik and, you know, so it was wonderful to hear your story, and I highly encourage people to reach out to you. What's the best way to reach you? Just through your email from the website, or
Email from the website, even my email, it's fine to share. And then, you know, I'm on LinkedIn. We also have a WhatsApp that's shared on the website. So by the way, Indonesia lives its life on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if people want to quickly say WhatsApp, somebody's looking at that. But they can even write to me, because this will be something where I will be always personally involved, right? So even my email, more than happy. We have our Instagram. So multiple channels. It just depends on, you know, what is the discussion. If they're just curious, then they can just, you know, ping and say, I'm curious about this. But if they really want a discussion, they can just write to me and say, Aparna, want to talk. Like you and I were introduced by Emma. Yeah. So it's perfectly fine.
Okay. Well, yeah. And if anyone has any trouble connecting, can always email myself as well. And I do want to show one more YouTube video, but I would like to let you go, because I know it's midnight there or later. And Jim or Sloan, did you have any other further questions? And then we'll let you go, and then I'll keep going and show the 3-minute fashion show video, unless you want to stay on, but I don't want to hold you longer, because I know you need to get some sleep.
I don't have any more questions. I just wanted to say thank you for taking this time. I know it's so late, and this is such an interesting store, and the way that you built like a web of support, and you're also like changing people's lives and supporting them, is such a really cool thing to look at. And I can't wait to buy something off this website.
Oh, and you know what I just
Yeah.
thought of that I remembered from your website is you also, I believe, if I have this correct, you also offer kind of a vacation tour
yes,
package.
So indeed. So for alternative sources of income for the communities, we have community-based ecotourism, really. And these are very curated experiences where weavers and their families are hosts. You meet the craftsmen. I mean, you meet the whole community. You live with them. Yeah.
That would be amazing. Jim, Sloan, anyone else that wants to join us, let's book a trip.
Yeah.
That would be
and there are all
fantastic.
kinds, right? There are all kinds. So it doesn't mean you have to rough it out or whatever. No, it's really curated. As long as you are respectful, you want to appreciate, right? You're not the Instagram selfie gent.
Yeah, we just go there for the
yeah. Then you're gonna love it. And honestly, just start with Toraja first. It's beautiful. It's breathtaking. It has multiple things. So
sounds lovely.
It's worth, please. And their seasonality is not an issue, because it's the highland. So you don't really have to plan like okay, I can't go that time. Yeah. So you could. Yeah.
You know, I think I flew to Jakarta once for work, and I went to Bali, and that's my experience with Indonesia. So I know there's so much more depth to it, and these villages like this just look stunning, and it would be beautiful. A real treat to do something like that. So Aparna, thank you so much. And I encourage everyone just to check out the website, learn more about what they do. If you're curious, send a note, and we just appreciate your time and sharing your story, and it's beautiful. And hopefully someday we can come visit you in person. That would be awesome.
Please. Looking forward to meeting you all. And seriously, thank you for the opportunity for letting me share this story, right? Because we are all about weaving stories of Indonesia.
Yes,
so thank you so much.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Go get some sleep. And I'm going to leave the video running for a second and look up this one more fashion show so people can see one of the runway shows that you have, and it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
And we'll be in touch, and yeah, just keep in touch, and thank you. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye, Jim. Bye, Snow.
Thanks,
Bye,
Aparna.
Prita.
Bye.
I'm gonna quickly show, just because I want to have it on. Can you guys see?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
can see it.
There's her jacket.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, and I love how she was talking about the younger generation likes more of the solids. There were so many beautiful solids that, one looked like a denim jean jacket. They look like linens, the sheer versions. There's so much you could do with that. So those designs were a little more traditional to their culture, but there's so many possibilities to design from the materials and with them doing other, styles that would be more fitting for your market. So thank you for coming, and I'm going to close it up, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right. Sounds
Bye.
great. All
Bye.
right. Take care, guys. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.